by me, Maria Zahir, and we have an esteemed guest with her, Robert Thorne, Rahila Jadi, Yvonne, Diego, Uneza, and Nemi with us. Welcome to all of our panelists. I will start with a little introduction of all our esteemed guests. We have Robert Thorne. He's an international educator and former principal with more than 30 years of experience in various educational systems and cultural settings. He is a founder of Developing Real Learners platform, a non-profit organization intent on helping schools develop learning communities that will, through their own cultural perspective, foster an approach to education that develops the holistic learner, leading to wise action and all within the current systems young people find themselves in. Robert's message is one of the communities transforming themselves as they approach to education through accessible and straightforward processes that rely on our common humanity and their own cultural perspective. He had recently been involved in projects in West Africa, South and East Asia, and in the Middle East. Along with Robert, joining us today is Rahila. Rahila Jadi has over 20 years of experience with education-related activities, including teaching, school administration, curriculum planning, progression, monitoring, and evaluation with over 6 years of project management and team leadership experience. She completed her MA in Education Leadership and Curriculum Management from Khan University Institute of Educational Development. Presently, she is completing her MPhil in Education Leadership and Management from Zagist University. Rahila worked in the capacity of Executive Professional Development Trainer and was part of collaboration between Harvard University and Khan University to train teachers to learn and develop progressive pedagogies. She is currently working with Foundation Public School in Karachi as the head of curriculum for Karachi and Hyderabad schools. With Rahila, we have Yvonne today. Yvonne is a British teacher starting in a variety of roles in UK, such as special education needs, early years development, primary education, and coordinator of children play facility. In 2004, Yvonne moved to the south of Spain to teach in a bilingual environment with an emphasis on English as a second language. And finally, as a head teacher in British Council accredited school. Yvonne started teacher training approximately 15 years ago, working freelance for publishing companies and as a professional jollyphonic trainer. She traveled extensively, providing training events to schools and individuals covering all areas of ESL, literacy development, and social and environmental development and curriculum consultancy. Thank you very much for joining us, Yvonne. And Diego is an international educator who is qualified to teach in UK and Italy. He worked for 5 years as a bilingual education school coordinator, a project supporter jointly by British Council and Italian Ministry of Education. Diego has experienced leadership roles at an innovative Cambridge school in Milan and an IB World School in Kyrgyzstan, Iraq, and was actively involved in projects in literacy and education language learning in the Middle East and Europe. He was Dean of Academics and PYP Coordinator at a newly established IB school in Mumbai, which is part of well-known group of schools across India. His training and consultancy experience has developed over 10 years across 3 continents. And joining us today as well is Professor Alvi, has 25 years of extensive experience in the field of STEM, STEAM, and assessment, curriculum involvement, innovative pedagogies, environmental education trainer, education in and with public and private sectors at both national and international levels. She has worked in diverse contexts across 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and Australia, with ministries, government officials, head of examination boards, district education office, Air Force, and at grassroots level. As a founding chair of Science Association of Pakistan and Khan and Sakar IB universities, Professor Alvi has led STEAM initiatives through teacher training in rural areas, low-resource schools, and among girls in Pakistan and Africa. She is also a respected consultant on assessment framework and policy. And finally, and not the, we have Nemi, in a former fashion designer with her own brand in the US. She is also a trained ballet dancer and international educator. Naomi is currently works as an experienced secondary teacher in top international schools in Tokyo and as a dance teacher in Temple University, Japan. Having gained a good ground at the international baccalaureate programs, Naomi has co-authored and coaching course for teens and worked at alternate pathways to high school success. She is currently committed to pursuing research at the link between emotional intelligence and dance through kinesthetic empathy and in exploring approaches to emotional quotient that measures EI. Well, we have a diverse panel here. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We will start with our first set of questions with our panelists. So, our first question is, what is transformation in education? So, Robert, would you like to add your thoughts to it?
Yeah, sure. I think probably on the planet there can't be too many people left who haven't heard the calls for a change in our education. We hear it a lot. Of course, there are countries such as India, for example, which have actually put this into policy in quite a big way. Mm-hmm. But what does it mean to transform education? Transforming it to what? Now, I think probably the best and the quickest way to indicate this is I was reading something by Cambridge International Education. A lot of you probably have heard of that. Mm-hmm. They're all over the world. Okay, so they've seen a lot of different education systems, and they say there are three things that education systems aim to do. Mm-hmm. Firstly, academic excellence. They want all children to excel in academic subjects, whatever that means. Right, so it's learning lots of information and knowing stuff and be able to pass tests. That's what they mean by that. Secondly, they want young people to reach their potential. And thirdly, they want them to develop the sort of attributes that help them to become good citizens and people who will add to society. Okay. Now, yes. I think that's really wonderful, and that's great. That's what we want. Surely that is what we all want. However, I think what's happened is that the first one has taken over. And so most schools around the world spend most of their energy in that first space, trying to get kids, all of the kids, to have academic excellence and pass tests. And then the rest of that, the other two things, they are finding it very difficult to spend any energy left over to do the other things, to help children to realize their potential, to help children develop the attributes that they have in order to become good citizens and good contributors to society. My contention is what we need to do is start to turn that around a bit, not to invert it, not to get rid of academic excellence, that would be silly. But if we help children to develop the attributes they need as learners, the attributes that they come to with us, as learners, so curiosity, collaboration, communication, all of these sorts of things. Mm-hmm. If we focus on those a little bit more, then they will begin to realize their potential. And in realizing their potential, they'll begin to do better at their exams. So I think we're fighting a losing battle in putting all our energy into getting good grades for all children. That's sort of impossible. But we can give every child a good education. That's what transforming education is all about.
Interesting. Every child should get a good education. Yvonne, would you like to add to this? Yvonne?
Yeah. Please. Following on from Robert, it's interesting too, looking at this globally on how different countries or different areas view what is a priority within their education, and I wholly support what Robert said. Having travelled extensively to schools, it's amazing how the socioeconomic areas can change the dynamics of what is required from children, and that you have countries that are very secure with what they have, allowing children to develop at their own pace using a whole range of methodology, to those that are, we just want academic results to get them out of this, break the chain of poverty, break the chain of the system they're living in. But we will explore this a bit further along as we move along. But yes, it's very true. We do tend to just highlight the academic results. And may I say that having worked in public and in private sector, in a private sector, this is what parents feel they're paying for. They want academic success, and play and anything like that can be done at home. So it's a juxtaposition in how we look at this. Yeah.
True. So from Asia's perspective, Rahila, would you like to add to this?
Thank you, Maria. This is really a very thought-provoking question which had been raised, and what Robert and my other colleague had extended as in their thoughts. I agree completely to this very factor. Sadly, in our context, I observed that this ratio of academic excellence towards the assessment is higher than what we are seeing in the Western world. So parental community, teachers, academicians, educators, everyone is so involved and engaged in this entire process of preparing students for assessment rather than for the world they are going to ahead to. So the real world situation, the day-to-day what they have to deal with in their futures, we are neglecting it completely in this zone, in this part of the world too, I feel.
Great. So, Neza, would you like to add to it?
Yes, thank you, Maria. I think what my colleagues have stated is something that is what transformation of education is. However, what we need to think beyond is that while we talk of transformation, contextually, there are different perspectives and there might be different things that we need to now bring in. Now, from the perspective of what is happening in the world in terms of the global changes, in terms of climate change and other things, we will have to make our education extremely relevant to the contextual dimensions and global needs of climate change. And so our transformation may have to take on different angles at different places. One is the learner attributes that we need to bring in, as Robert highlights. But also, if a learner has to really reconstruct a society where there are ethical values and where there are disturbances and things, then our transformation will have to lead into those dimensions as well. But our economic dimensions are other aspects that we need to relate to. So our education, the current education transformation has to be more holistic and more broad to be so that we can really bring in the elements of transformation that are required. Initially, it was, as we have read about and implemented Dewey's in our work, who talks about learner-centered approaches and more approaches in which the learner development happens. And that is what our academy is about. But beyond that, there are STEM perspective, there are environmental perspectives, there are societal reconstruction perspective, and our education, the need of current time is actually to reorient education towards that sort of transformation.
Interesting. So reorientation of our education system. So what do you think, Diego? Do you agree with Uneza?
I do. And I think that when we say, when we talk about transforming education or change or reforming education, we should consider the fact that it happens at different levels, and it's not linear, and it happens over time, and there are some key players involved. If we look at the international context right now, we can see that in a variety of countries and contexts, politics plays quite an important role defining what the objectives are and what the values of an educational system should be. Regarding, for example, we can look at what they are the so-called soft skills or 21st century learning, for example. And then what I would like to discuss is, to add to this, is that perhaps we should better consider the role of the leadership in a learning community and at different levels, because that might very well be the let's say the final. It may have the final impact on what then happens in the classroom, although there still the teacher plays a vital role there. So we should definitely consider all these levels.
Great, thank you. Naomi, what are your thoughts about it? What
Thank you.
is transformation for you, Naomi?
Yeah, so as Robert highlighted, the world is still heavily focused on the highlight in academic results. And then I think the most reason that is because how, the problem is that the entry system of the higher education, like college, is not changing quickly enough.
Yeah.
So, like the schools like where I teach is secondary school, we need to make sure the students are getting higher academic results in order to get into the university where they can study what they want to study.
Yeah.
So still, like here in Japan and also in the United States, I started seeing a lot of changes that the students are getting accepted because of the curriculum or outside of school curriculum that they have been spending more time, and university sees the quality of it. And then I'm also happy to see some of the teachers are more into STEAM education instead of STEM education. Arts is the only one really focus on emotional intelligence. So like kids really need to label how they are feeling and what they want to know. Otherwise, they can't really understand what their future is going to be. And the other day I was watching TED Talk, and this man, his name is Shai Rishav. Does anybody know? Who started People's University. It's an online university for free, and it's really, really awesome so that he can take the financial discrimination out. So seeing higher education system changing like that, that itself is a transforming education so that the students can really focus on what they really love to do and what they excel in their area, and individually they can achieve their dreams.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with you, Naomi, because now we see success people who have emotional intelligence. So IQ was think of the past, I guess. So when we're thinking of transformation of education, we should more focus on EQ now, isn't it? So that's something that is preparing our learners or students or generation of tomorrow to deal with the challenges that they don't face nowadays. And world has totally changed. The education system has totally changed since I was in school. I can say, don't ask me when. Yeah, but when we keep on talking about it's a tech savvy generation. It is 21st century. So shouldn't the transformation of education was a need of the hour that should have taken place as the decades moved on? Diego, I would start with you because this is where the school community needs to transform education, isn't it?
That's true. You're right. And a learning community or a school community that is such a complex environment, and it should place this as the let's say the main goal. We know that there are key players working at the same time with different agenda, sometimes different values. There is a key element that I would like to share and discuss, which is the level of engagement that, for example, the different stakeholders have when it comes to decisions. Mm-hmm. As we often hear, we live in a changing world, in a rapidly changing world, and we don't really know what the kind of knowledge that future students will need in 10 years or even in 5 years. For a moment, if we just stop, we go back to to, let's say, 2019 or the beginning of 2020, we didn't really know what was going to happen after a few months, and the kind of skills and knowledge that was required to move learning communities completely online for everything that happened. That is a clear example. I would argue that we didn't really need the pandemic to know that we couldn't really predict the knowledge that students need. That's why we say that we should say that a learning community should try to focus not only on the academic, but at the whole different sets of skills and processes to support learners that can identify their priorities and the knowledge that they need for the future.
Right, the skills and priorities. Thank you for bringing this up, because I know after pandemic, that's where the panic came in the educational sector. The teachers were not skilled enough to teach online. And although it was already 21st century we were in. So who is responsible? It's school communities. Do we, what is the parents, what they need, what is that teachers need, and what about the school leaders? So Robert, would you like to shed light on this, please?
Yeah, sure. So what I think is, so one of the reasons why I'm very interested in this topic is because I'm seeing that we have all of the information, the wisdom, the knowledge. We have it in the past. If you look in the past, in many countries, how people used to teach, all right, only select groups perhaps, but there was a wisdom about how they taught. If you look now at certain programs like International Baccalaureate, the NEP, the spirit behind the NEP 2020 in India, I think that's a very thing. There's the Finnish education, that's good for Finnish people in their culture. It depends on your culture. There's a lot of wisdom going into creating very good learning communities, you know, where you go to school and everybody's together in doing what they're doing and providing a holistic experience for children. Yeah. But if you're a school that's been outside all that, if you've been used to just, you know, doing the exams and doing the usual teaching and curriculum and that, how do you actually change it? And we've had all these answers for a very long time, but why have we not been changing? And so one of the things that I really would like to do is to help communities to understand who is responsible and how to take those first steps. And that's why I set up Developing All Learners and this Academy of Learner Development. Now, what it comes down to is that we're all responsible. And I know that's an easy answer. So where do we start? So everybody has a place to start. So you've got all these things, and we've mentioned them today. We've got metacognition, and we've got, I can't remember the ones we mentioned today, actually. Emotional intelligence. I've got some friends who are really into emotional intelligence and friends who are really into metacognition. This is the key. This is the key. If you are a principal or a school owner and you're sitting there and you're thinking, which of these people do I listen to? Because they all sound really good. I would say that there is an underlying thing that you need to look at. And it sort of goes back to what Peter Senge said about learning organizations. And so if you have a school, where do you begin? And I think you've got to ask yourself, what sort of education, or you ask your children. This is what I've done in many schools. You ask them, what sort of education do you really need? What do you want education to do for you? And it's a really weird thing, because kids all around the world come out with, we want to be happy and we want to be successful in life. And you ask them, what do you mean by happiness? What do you mean by success? And they come out with their definitions. And it's actually quite interesting. It's actually a really good thing for all schools to do, because in that you begin to realize, wow, what is it what we're doing?
Mm.
And then you can find, you say, well, okay, if you want to be happy and successful, what do you need to be happy and successful? What characteristics do you need to be happy and successful? Well, we need to be able to ask questions, be curious, all those sorts of attributes come out. And then you can say to your staff, all right, we're going to carry on doing what we're doing, but where in what we're doing do we find those attributes? And you can say to parents, what do you do at home to help these children, to help your children to develop these attributes? Because you can do the same thing with parents. I've done that with parents. What attributes do you think young people really need to be happy and successful these days? And the parents come out with the same thing as the teachers come out with. And it's amazing, because when you really boil it down and spend some good time on it, you find that they come out to these attributes. Cambridge has them, IB has them, I've got a set of them on my website. They're slightly different, but they come out to be basically the same thing. The thing that the children are coming to you with in the first place.
Yeah.
They're coming to you curious. They're coming to you with communication skills that might need a bit of tuning, but they're pretty good. They come to you with a basic idea of collaborating, and so you explore collaborating with them. It's about harnessing these habits. Some people call them habits of mind. It's about harnessing them and letting on everybody in the school, even the security guard and the cleaners, everybody in the school, understand that we come to school to develop these things.
Yeah.
In the context of us. If I'm a maths teacher, I do it in the context of my maths teaching. If I'm a cleaner, I do it in the context of my job. I'm a role model. When someone asks me a question, I answer them, or I smile, or I do something very simple, just to make the whole community point in the same direction. So Peter Senge, just one more thing. Peter Senge, his idea, you develop trust. And I see a lot of schools where this goes wrong is that there isn't trust in the school between people. You're not trusted to do your job properly. A principal isn't trusted to do their job properly because the school owner is fiddling around with it, who is a businessman.
Yeah.
Or the teachers are not trusted to do their job because they're not getting the support that they need. So we need trust, we need communication, we need good collaboration. And when you've got those things, you can get out a really true shared vision of where you want to go. And from that, everyone then has their responsibility to use their role, to identify their role in getting to that shared vision. Okay.
So what I understand, Robert, you're trying to say, like, that's how I even listed these questions. If you notice, I started from parents, then I took it down to leaders.
That's
so
right.
It's like bottom-up approach. So what I always know that education starts from home, and parents are the best guides that what attributes their kids need to develop as better learners, and then followed by teachers and then school. And we can always say, even my kids used to say, oh, my teacher said that, she's right. I think, mommy, you don't know better. So I think it's this hierarchy or the process, if you like, to follow that helps to transform education. So, Yvonne, what do you think? Is it the top-up or bottom-up approach to transform education?
Well, Robert got it very correct there, and I can tell he was a head teacher, because we always have to think about the stakeholders, and it's not until you get to that position where you see the fine balance between what you have and the money that is in that as well. But when I took over a school, I had to transform it from one system to another, and I ultimately thought my key to doing this successfully was getting the parents on board. And this was in Spain. And in Spain, we don't have a national curriculum. We have competencies that children are required to meet each year of their academic process. So it was working with the parents first, which was very unusual for them. They didn't know that level of being included in why we're doing this, what are the outcomes, how can you support them? Because before it had been a very academic process. And additionally, it was getting the trust of the teachers. And again, this is what, a little bit what Robert mentioned is we have young, enthusiastic teachers who bring a lot of methodology. And I love what Nami said about the social and emotional learning. It is key to the success of children's learning, being able to talk about how they feel about things. But additionally, the teachers too. The teachers being able to be honest, that word honest, about, I don't understand, I don't know where you want me to take, you're taking me. So the infrastructure was rippling out to parents and teachers, and then having that trust that I know where we want to go. I know where we want to go, but it's a fluid direction that we can change and amend as a group together. So getting the parents working with us was the first key to change within a school I was working in. But that was one school. Imagine trying to do that in a society. Imagine trying to do that within a country. There has to be a great support system to help school leavers. And ultimately, what we're thinking about is, we talk about school leavers. What about people who are offering the jobs? Do we need to change their idea of, this is a snapshot of a child on a particular day doing an exam, they may have performed really badly.
Yeah.
How about, an assessment of that child? They may excel in that classroom, but can't transpose that to a written exam. They may have fabulous oral skills where they can give a dialogue and explain everything, but that can't be transposed to that one date in their lives where they have to do an exam. So you also have to look at that way, where as employers, what are you looking for? A different way to use what children are taking with them from school and assess it.
Yes, of course. And that's where communication and collaboration cannot be completed, as Robert said, because if this triangle we're hitting, the three corners from parents and teachers in schools are not connected properly, that means we are not working with school communities effectively. We are just enforcing our ideas through teachers and going home to parents in the ideology that we like. So, Nemi, what do you think? What should we say to the people like us who support transforming education in 21st century? Should this ideology be continued to be forced through the school leadership, or there should be some kind of process of thinking in this?
I think, as a parent, and it sounds like Maria, you're a parent of few children. Well, we are also blind searching how we raise children. And often when we get stuck, we ask our advice from our parents. And then, that's like a 2-generation skips to like what is actually happening in 21st century. I see a lot of students coming from very much of cram school type of education to our school. And then they slowly but surely started accepting to be open-mindedness, and then also understand what it's like to be a holistic learner through all the curriculums that we offer in my school. And then parents just like decided, you're not scoring math score enough, and then I need to pull you out. And then they'll just put this children back to, more like a memory-based, so-called highly like academic score school. And it's really unfortunate because we need to educate the parents first. And my colleague and I have been trying to find a way to bring more parents. And since it's been COVID, it's a little bit difficult because the community is not open to coming in our school for the past 2-3 years. But I think it's going to change soon. And hearing what Robert was saying, and then also Yvonne was saying, it made me realize that it also starts from the classroom too. I just need to communicate with the parents, hey, this is what I'm doing in my class, and I need your help to develop what, like at home as well, so that we can align. And then, education is all about school, parents, and children all triangle together. So I think knowing that, we can probably make a change in the future soon.
Great. Yes, it always has to be parents, teachers, and leaders together in the school to make it successful. Rahila, what are your thoughts about it?
I agree to what they all had spoken about. However, I feel that awareness is the key to all this aspect. and it comes with a visionary approach which is linked towards the process of thinking. Parents are important stakeholder, I always believe in. So what we are lacking in is leading in collaboration from all ends. We are missing out on a very important element, Maria, over here, which is providing choices to our students in schools.
Yeah.
In educational sector, what limited choices do they have? And above all, it's a parental pressure, societal pressure, and much more is there. So a lot of decision making, if you would involve the students also, if you would give their voice a chance, so probably we will be able to see this transformation to occur. Maybe it will start with a slow process, but gradually it is going to link up, and we are very hopeful that it is going to take its root sooner or later. So it is something that involvement and voices and choices along with awareness, it's like drilling constantly, talking about it constantly. And also what Nomi was just spoke about, there is a lot of um, focus on cognitive development, a lot of focus on developing students as in their brains and all that, but unable to touch the affective domain and those aspects. So we need to cater to those aspects too.
True. Yes. Of course, we can keep on having a discussion hours and hours about transforming education, but where does the action take place? I think the little steps that we are together in educators and all the attendees attending and listening to us today, if we join hands together and start making this transformation, even starting from our classroom, having the colleagues collaborate with us, having, talking to our coordinators, little steps, one at a time, I'm sure we will be able to implement and make them understand that it is the need and it is very important to transform education. It's not just about tests and exams and having their IQ tested and having 90 out of 100 or 99 out of 100 or A stars. It's about how the actual learning takes place. So, Uneza, you are at a very important place in your job profile where you can raise this voice. So how are you dealing with this transformation in education? Neza, are you there with us?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yes. I think what my colleagues have stated, these are all of the aspects that we need to really work on. However, one angle one area that I have been working extensively in is the area of assessments. And in this area of assessments, what I've tried to work with all ministries and is to really bring in the key dimensions that students need to develop in, and which is not only cognitive dimensions, but the affective dimensions and the skills dimensions, and how do you really then assess that? So my frameworks talk that you could see on LinkedIn uploaded talks has states that apart from language cognitive, what are the skills dimension in it? Apart from science cognitive, what are the skills dimensions of science of curiosity and inquiry and other aspects? And how do you then assess it through classroom-based assessments, authentic assessments, and other ways of assessments? And how do you then document it through portfolio assessments? So at the end, can a student leave a matriculation system with a wonderful portfolio that talks about all the wonderful things that the student has done, and it's not only cognitive, and give that to a higher education system and say, can I be admitted? And there are systems where this is already happening. So Queensland, where I did my research study, or Australia, where I did my research study, I could see schools already implementing portfolio assessment the day with which they presented their portfolio to their parents and other communities, that this is what I've done. I don't have a report card, but this is what I've done, and look at what I've done. But even in that situation, I was asking parents, and they were saying, how does my child compare with others? And I say, why do you need that comparison when you can see what your child has performed and the level that which the child has performed? not only cognitive skills, but the wonderful other skills that the child has developed. And through now student, teachers, and parents conferences, that was then presented. And there are educational boards that are already implementing not examination but other forms of assessment to move from school education to higher education. So if there are examples available, we need to take the risk. We need to come up in the school systems and say, yes, at least up to middle level, let's do away with only paper pencil test. Let's now start working more on projects and other forms of assessment. In Pakistan, at the boards level, we are trying to bring in multiple things in there. But up till class 8, at least we are promoting and we are supporting systems to say, if you want to shift, let's help you see other forms of assessments. And this different types of curriculums and skill shifts that we are trying to now bring in. So in Pakistan, Maria, you would know that the commerce curriculum was formulated in the 70s. Business education has changed so much, but our curriculum change has not happened. So that's one thing that I'm currently working on, bringing in a new commerce curriculum for the entire country. And there are multiple other things that we all need to think about and bring in.
Yes, and it's like generation to generation, same textbooks are used.
Same textbooks
So
are
please change that.
Yes.
So it's like books that my mom used, I was using that, and now my kids and my
Yes.
hopefully not the next generation will use the same books. It's time.
In the 70s they were written, and even till now they're the same books that have been implemented.
Yeah.
So this year we have changed the science textbooks for all of them, but we are coming up with new textbooks and new curriculums for the country.
Great. Thank you so much, Neza, for your input. So it's time to involve the attendees now. I request you to please join this poll with us. Let's reflect in one word. Share your thoughts about our discussion so far. So we request you to go to pollev.com and enter Maria Zahir 806 to respond to this activity. In one word, share your thoughts about our discussion so far, please. So if you go to Google Chrome or any other Google search or platform, please go to Poll EV. There's a link in the chat box as well to respond to the question. Just one word. Thank you. We're glad we're making it interesting for you. Assuring, okay. Change is coming, fruitful, great. Inspiring, we're glad we are inspiring you. Thought-provoking, is it? Thank you. Another 30 seconds for your answers. Okay. So the biggest word that we found was interesting. So I'm glad you're finding it inspiring and interesting and thought-provoking. That's what we're aiming for today. Great. Thank you so much, audience, for giving us your input. Thank you. We will move on now. Thank you for your answers, and I'm glad that you are engaged and you're finding it interesting to listen to us. Right, so Diego, I will again start with you. What about the non-teaching staff and the wider community? What do you think, how they can play a role in transforming education?
This is a very interesting part of the discussion, I think. and it's very complex. So I just would like to share my 2 cents here with you and everyone. And I would like to do it through the lens of what is happening with creativity in schools. This is something that I'm passionate about, and I decided to study a little bit further. And I noticed a few things. As we know, creativity is the sort of buzzword over the last few years, over the past, let's say, 10 years in general, not only in educational research, but also from the push that comes from governments, companies, and international organizations. And perhaps you also have noticed a few things that if we look at education and schools in general at the moment, it looks like that children have the right, and it's a good thing, to be creative in the early years and in a primary school setting. But then when they get into middle school, that disappears. They have to get ready for exams and examinations. So education becomes more sort of transactional there. And you lose all the effort and everything that has been done before at a crucial time in the development of an individual person. And also you may find resistance from other people involved in a learning community. But the good news is this, that we have tools to support this. And first, we have to clarify what we really mean by, in this case, creativity, or what we really mean by student agency or the development of critical thinking. And say that, for example, something that is people tend to say they are all those skills. Maybe they're not really skills. It's a process, and it requires time. And we need people, including non-teaching staff and the many actors involved, to support the idea that, for example, again, with regards to creativity, is that through creativity and with creativity, knowledge doesn't get lost. Is actually knowledge is best used to and it's synthesized to create new solutions to problems, and it may lead to deeper learning, more effective learning, that also helps a person to be, let's say, as we say, self-guided. So all these things are connected, but first we have to clarify this and remember that participation together with collaboration are essential. It cannot be just top-down. It has to be bottom-up and shared across people, remembering that we all have our own different training and knowledge and background, and we all have something to give to other people in the community.
True. Yes, we all have something to give. I'm sure the non-teaching staff and wider community. We always have visits from, other supporting system in our society. Like we have a fire brigade coming in. They tell us about the fire drills and how to keep us safe in fires and things like that. So that's also learning development, isn't it? It doesn't have to be textbook content that a learner learns. So we have to think beyond our course books, beyond our textbooks. So, Robert, what would you say about this?
Well, I gave my example of, of the cleaning lady who smiles, who's positive, who's a good role model, who picks things up, who helps out. And I've seen really good examples of that actually in schools. So that's at one level. It's sort of being part of the community and being positive and knowing what it's about. I think Diego is absolutely right. Having awareness. We've got to spread this awareness. It really bothers me when I'm listening to people coming out with an idea, a good idea on about education, and they're on television, they're in the news, and the people interviewing them have got no idea. They're drawing. They've got this idea. Well, school shouldn't be like that, should it? Shouldn't it be sort of suffering and sitting and listening? And they don't have any idea. Media is very powerful. So where are the stories in the media? Where are the writers of great films? And we've had some great films. Hollywood has created some great films. I'm sure in different countries they have. But why? There's a multitude of ways we can get the message across and build this awareness. Now, who is we? We is you and I. If you're a teacher, you've got your children there in front of you. You've got, 20, 30 young people who are the most overlooked resource that a school has for getting awareness out there. Children can make other people aware, people they come across. They should be aware. They're the first ones to be aware of this. Getting the staff together and saying, how do you feel? The office staff, how do you feel? How are things going? How does it work with you? What are the levels of trust between you? What are the levels of, how do you communicate? Are you aware of this? So not leaving them out of the development of a school. And the questions are the same for everyone or not. The answers might be different.
Great. I love this thought of saying the cleaning women. She was giving a smile is also educating, because we have seen frowning faces in the classrooms or very stern teachers coming, and we were scared of her instead of interested in learning from her. So I think just
can I come in and just
yes,
add
please,
something?
Vanessa. Yes, please go ahead.
But there was this interesting discussion that I always had with my students, that there were two cleaners at NASA, and someone asked one of the cleaner, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I am cleaning the place, and this is my job." Then the person moves on and asks the next cleaner, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I am preparing NASA for all the people to really explore and do research and then really move on to the moon and really work on all of the scientific aspects of it." And this difference in the understanding of what the cleaners are doing is what I think everyone in the staff needs to do. And there is one school that I was doing my research in Karachi, and people know the school. It's Shah Wilayat School, one of the schools that people aspire to go to. And there I started asking students and everyone, what is the vision of this school? And I heard the same thing from everyone. There was such a shared vision that everyone knew what was happening in this school and why am I there in this school. And that school tops not only it's excellent academically, but excellence throughout. So every teacher they own it, the vision and the mission, and they develop it together. And so the child knows, the learner knows, the principal knows, the cleaner knows, everyone knows. It is everywhere with them. So I think this is what Robert is also saying, that everyone owns it and everyone is part of that community. We need to, as Peter says, we need to develop a learning organization and a learning community where everyone is learning, exploring, developing. So we can see around us that the head teacher is similar, the teachers are similar. They're all in the inquiry and learning process. And this is what the future is. They're all using the current tech. They're all using all of that. So that sort of learning community has to be developed all around in systems. We all have some ideas. I think if we come together, we can really bring about that transformation that we want to see in education.
Why not? That's what we're aiming for today, isn't it? So
very, very quickly interacting.
Yeah, Yvonne, I was just about to ask you.
Okay.
Yvonne,
because some of you may be familiar with, I put it in the chat, Reggio Emilia, which is an education system where every member of staff, teaching and non-teaching, know everything that's going to happen, and that the teachers are there as guides. And that means that the gardener knows the philosophy of the school. He's included in the teaching trajectory. There's peer learning. There's a big plaza where younger children mix with older children and they're doing problem-based learning. And there's a lot of emphasis on this, and it's called the 100 Voices of Children, going back to what Diego said about creativity, how children find the solutions to problems using a creative response. But getting back to the non-teaching staff, they are then included in the assessment process. So a gardener will say, yes, Jose asked me about this. And I said to him, well, why do you think there's water coming out the hose? What do you think the process is? So the non-teaching staff are included in being able to ask questions, getting children to think, and also about talking about their emotional status. So if you're looking for a complete system, and parts of this has been added to the curriculums in the States, also in Spain, also in other places, in Scotland. But it can only go so far within the system out of Italy because of the formal teaching requirements that happen at about 6 and 8 years old. And, there was a point, it was so popular, it's like, well, we're going to do a Reggio. But please have a look, and especially the exhibitions where all the children's work of their creativity has been put out there. But that trickled out to the wider community. In that they understood the philosophy and how children came out so emotionally secure from the process. So please have a look at that. And trying to include non-teaching staff in some countries is not easy because some non-teaching staff don't see it as a responsibility, or they're remet, or they're being paid enough. So it's quite difficult in one respect. And also in another, it's great to involve them because they feel very valued. So we have that double-edged sword again.
Can I pick up on what Yvonne said, because it brings together a couple of things?
Yes.
Somebody the other day actually several people were complaining the other day about parents coming in and basically bullying teachers to an extent that the teachers left and left the profession. This is also connected to this. The idea is this: if you work at our school, this is what you're signing up for. Now, if you're a private school, it's your vision, mission statement, your values, whatever you call those things. If you're a state school, you may have those somewhere buried under some paper somewhere, or it may be very clear. But every school must have a purpose. And it must have a meaning. When you come to this school, this is what our community stands for. And when you come into our school, then that's what you have to not adhere to, but that's what you need to be reflecting. That's what you need to be trying to realize, that vision. Okay. So if you're a parent and you come in and you start bullying, well, that's not the way we do things here. And the children should be able to say that, look, this is not the way we do things here. Yeah. And the cleaning staff and that, they come, all right, they're not there to learn academic stuff. They're there to make their job more meaningful. Now, how much more meaningful could a job be if you go there and you're involved in the life of the school to some extent? Somebody acknowledges you.
Yeah, I can give an example here, Robert, because when I was at school, after lunchtime, each section was responsible to clean their area where we had our lunch. Just picking up wrappers from the floor brought a smile to our cleaning staff. And in return, when I was young and when I used to go home, I used to tell Mommy, let me help you pick up this garbage. Let me help you clear up this room. So education is not about the course we're teaching. I think it's holistically reforming a personality in a child. It's out beyond those classroom walls, beyond the community where they will merge in or integrate themselves after schooling. So it's not about just this thing. It's the wider community we are involved in, isn't it?
To interrupt,
yes.
can I just say one thing about that? Because
Please.
It's a very dangerous thing. You're right, it's not just inside the classroom, but it's not just inside the classroom. It is inside the classroom walls, and the mathematics teacher and the science teacher, it is their responsibility to develop these things. So it's how you approach your teaching is how you're developing the children. Your primary thing is developing these learners in the context of your subject. They will become great learners and they will do your subject better.
True.
Guaranteed.
Great, yes. So what do they need to create the schools that the society really needs? So, Nemi, I would start with you with this question.
So I was just kind of talking to Robert about this morning, and I left it blank because it was a lot of things. So probably it's better to start with someone else.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so, Rahila, what would you add to this?
I believe in the present context and all that, we have been missing out on this very important aspect of hidden curriculum, what Robert and my other colleagues were talking about. So the more focus onto that, along with the written curriculum documents and all that syllabi and the textbook that we need to cover. So if we focus on that hidden curriculum, what example, Maria, you have given is actually that hidden curriculum that you learned at school and you have adopted as a life skill and collaborating at your home too. So it's actually changing the entire process of thinking, and it has a lot to do to create a balanced society as well. It brings in the element of empathy, the element of understanding, and not judging people around. This is what we all need to train our children also, other than creativity, collaboration, and all those aspects. So this is something that I feel we need to focus more towards, and definitely what my other fellow who's taking care of this EQ aspect would agree with me that it is actually shaping the human element in any individual.
Yeah. So the attributes is not just about to learn your times table from 1 to 200, or attributes of learning development doesn't mean just to finish up your course and have the knowledge of biology or chemistry or any other subject. Is you are shaping a personality of a student to think and communicate and integrate beyond classroom. So Diego, what do you think that hidden curriculum that Rahila is talking about is really? How can we individually as teachers take that baby steps to develop a good learner to integrate well in a society?
Well, let me say this, and I'll try to explain. There is from one perspective, we always have to remember that a school is an organization that, in some ways, it reflects society. Okay, and that is an aspect that we cannot really avoid in some ways. But it is also true that schools, and let's say a learning community, okay, at the different levels of complexity that it has, it does go beyond that. It already does. And it can promote change because it is already happening. Okay. So what I would say is that we have to look at things and see what the different stakeholders or actors involved can do. Okay. And it is really complex. When you mentioned the hidden curriculum, and this is something that it has to be studied. Okay, and for example, in my own tiny little dimension, recently I had to investigate how what is called international mindedness in the IB framework is promoted in a school. Okay, and what can actually what can prevent a school from promoting it successfully. Okay, and that is basically the role of the school communities, teachers and administrators especially, to model it on a daily basis. Okay, and one big issue over there is that sometimes school leaders or administrators, they don't really see beyond, let's say, the day-to-day daily dimension, in the sense that, for example, giving voice to a group of students when it comes to, let's say, a sort of discrimination that they perceived they have received, for example, it does not embarrass the school, because that is the problem at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It does actually strengthen the learning community, because it gives people an opportunity to share something that is about their own experience, and it validates their own experience. One last thing that I want to say about this is that perhaps we really have to consider how we organize schools, because at the moment across the world, even let's say more schools that they are trying to promote change, as we are saying, in a more holistic way.
Yeah.
But still there are organized age groups, for example. The classrooms, and with specific objectives and standards that are put in place. So we tell people that by the age of, they have to reach this, and that. Perhaps that is something that we have to look into, and rather than look at the age group, perhaps we will really have to look at the development of a child or a student. And that is just one dimension. And as you can imagine, if we change that, we really, the whole organization of a primary school, for example, or a middle school, it gets different and complicated. So it takes time as well.
Yes. So Yvonne, because you work with early years learners, so I think that we always hear that first 5 years of a child develops him well. So what do you suggest at those early years of learning, and educators or the stakeholders or anybody involved in transforming education can do to make a difference to the learning community?
My experience, in the UK, I started off in the UK where it was a very holistic approach and parents were included. I'm very mindful of what Robert said about parents coming into the classroom and the reactions they've had. Then when I moved to Spain, it was a completely different thing, where the parents tend to have a lot of control over what they want their children to learn or not learn. And understand a very antiquated, I relate very much to what was said earlier on about inherited books, curriculums that haven't changed, and old methodology. But then there was a new wave of parents coming through that were looking outwards to see what was going on in other countries and wanted change for their children and wanted more things proactive. However, then going internationally, it was literally a lottery, depending on the country, depending on the finances, and depending what the school resources had.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, again, as I have mentioned, everybody looks to Finland and says, wow, what a great system. They changed, but they changed society before they changed the educational system. And 30 years ago, they had the same problems, and that's why they changed.
Yeah.
So getting it right at the beginning, I think fundamentally comes back to getting children socially and emotionally secure with themselves, and then the learning will fall into place. And this is then the platform that we have to build on. And I used to say in my school, we really got to get not mindfulness, but social emotional learning in place, so that children could accept that, from failure you can rise up, or from expressing your opinions is really important. But having to say that in the international arena, early years is always dominated by second language acquisition.
Yeah.
And that puts a heavy load on children being able to become who you want them to become. They're cognitively ready at about 6 or 8. They're already frustrated. They're already under a huge burden of being able to, you've got to talk in English. You've got to speak in English. What do you know in English? And it snuffs out so much creativity that we have this laced through the system. So there's a combination of things. I would love that children got to the point where they were emotionally secure, played with language. We had parents in understanding the methodology that we're using, and that it wasn't that we want a 3-year-old to start writing. They're not cognitively ready for that. So, again, going back to this rippling out, if we had more information on where we want children to be and how we want them to get there, it all comes back to that all the time, that full circle of knowledge.
True. That circle of knowledge is very important, because we're just throwing arrows in the dark then without having an aim, isn't it? So if the aim is not channelized in the right direction, it's just about talk, then there's no action.
But
so
ultimately, early years is seen as, in some societies, it's seen as a really pivotal place where children get the foundation that they can build on. And in others, it's seen as kind of like, well, they're just filling up time till the real learning starts. So it is disappointing. I've been to some countries where it's very proactive, and other countries where, it is a real balance. And in the States as well, we tend to look at, in the United States, it all depends on where you are located in the United States and what you get. So the same with the UK. So it can be a lottery.
It's the context and the resources available, and is very important when we talk about transformation in education. Not one size fits all, isn't it? So we can adapt to some things, but we cannot enforce on that context or the resources available in each country.
Yeah, and if you really want to push it out further, I've done a lot of work with poor rural schools in India, and where do you start from there? We're looking at mainstream, but if you open that circle even bigger, where do you stand with schools that are basically, and the same with pilot projects in Africa, where children are basically working with a piece of chalk and a chalkboard? Where's the fairness there?
So we have to think in all aspects. So I hope we have been some thought-provoking questions to our attendees as well, and to the wider audience. This recording will be published too, and let's see if we can have some transformation beginning from there. So, Robert, I will start with this last question to wrap up this session. So, a minute or so from all of our panelists about this question to wrap up this session. What do you see as the major aspect of education that needs changing in your experience, Robert?
Okay, so I really think that if you have a good school, it's the approach. If you have a bad school, it's the trust and communication and collaboration between people. So getting the shared vision and then getting the approach. So knowing what it is you want, what it is you need. So somebody said there's a mismatch between education and employers or industry. What is it that they want? What is it that we can do? And you find out, as I think Andrea pointed out, basically, it's about developing the human. And we can develop humans, and kids can get good grades as well. And we can show you how to do that.
Yes, great. So, Uneza, would you like to add to it?
Yes, Maria, I want to add up to both of those questions. One is in the one, what schools really need, and then linking it to the second one is at a very basic level, schools need a really good transformative curriculum in the school, which is dynamic, which is changing, which is process oriented, not which is top down. So, and we have some experiences of working in those transformative curriculum areas in which we can really bring in the attributes and the future skills and the type of aspects that needs to be brought into languages and EC levels and other levels. So schools have, this is a basic need of all schools. We cannot only rely on a national curriculum, or we can't blame the political government and say there is no curriculum, but schools need to really now work on their internal transformative curriculums. And while they are working on that, a process approach needs to be taken up. The approach has to be extremely different, where every person in the school becomes part of that transformation, and they own it, they share it, and they all become part of it. That is a fundamental thing that I think we need to be doing. And with that, we need to now start questioning all the type of assessments we are doing, at least up to the middle level. We need to just avoid paper pencil test only and work on multiple forms of assessments. So those are two things that I've learned from my experiences, and I think schools need to really work on this.
I think owning the responsibility is the big attribute that we need from the education system. If you say it's the government's job to do it, it's the education ministry's job to do it. So what are we doing? We are just letting our hands away from something that we need to own. It's the grassroots level there we have to think and change the transformation from there. I would agree with you with that, Neza. So Rahila, what would you like to add to this?
Maria, over a period of time, I have seen a lot of conflicting situation in terms of what the school philosophy has been written down and what is happening in the real classroom or school context or in any educational context. So that dimension needs to be aligned first thing first, because what you are visioning, what you are writing it or penning down as a philosophy for your school or your educational organization is something that has to be linked to what you're going to attain or achieve. And also one word that has actually clicked me while I looked at this very question, that it's a mindset. Mindset that needs to be changed. It's a paradigm shift would only occur like earlier when Robert and I had gotten an opportunity to train some teachers collectively, and Oneza was part of it. So we assume that there is a lot of collaboration happening in the classroom, by assuming or assigning some group work to students. However, the very notion is not fitting the right puzzle. So it is something that we need to see gradually develop and changed, and feel that it's a process of facilitation and coaching one has to go through, a lot of mentoring, a lot of feedback mechanism that needs to be built in, has to be taken care of. So I believe that this would, if we would start working on those lines, so there's a hope for transformation in education.
Yes, and fingers crossed, we'll continue pushing our borders and pushing our thoughts and sharing our thoughts with similar like-minded educators who are believing the fact that it is time to transform education now. So, Nemi, what would you like to say?
Thank you. So my idea is simple. We can't underestimate the power of peer-to-peer learning. And that includes from kids, kindergarten kids, all the way to admin. And we are really nothing without any really good team members. And one thing must be clear, and my idea is, to teach the differences between feedback and criticism. Because when you really say, like, usually teachers are saying, like, good job, blah, 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 but you need to do this to improve. And that becomes criticism. But if you say, this is really good job, and if you do this, you can improve. Because everybody does really well with the prize. And then when you know that you're doing well, you repeat the actions. And then your brain wants to do the right thing. And it's simple things, but, like leadership or the teachers or even like the students often don't really understand how to give constructive, good feedback. And if you actually teach students that, I think, like social capitalism can be really raised, and the school can be a better and fun place for everybody to be, including the staff members.
Great, thank you, Nemi, for your input. So we will wrap up the session here. We will again involve the attendees. If you have any questions, please share now. And then again, like you attended the poll before, if you go to pollev.com and enter Maria Zahir 806, and you can leave your questions there, and it will show up on the screen, and our panelists will be able to reply to you. You can do that in the chat box, or you can easily go to pollev.com and enter your questions. And you'll be able to view them on the screen here. The link has been shared in the chat box as well, and your questions will start showing up, and a panelist will be happy to respond to you. So if you go on Google Chrome and go to pollev.com and enter Maria Zahir 806, that's where you can record your questions. And there was lots of activity going on, and Robert has been actively responding to the questions there. Thank you. You liked the event. Any questions for the panelists? Please leave it there. So Jackie says, I know we are talking about transformation. Yes. If you could kindly leave your question there on pollev.com, we will be better off to respond to your questions. We have one question. Should there be a difference in teaching expat children than local children? Anybody would like to respond to this?
I think you're going to open up a minefield there because, because having taught for many years expat children, and it's also you're dealing with parents who come from a different educational philosophy and understanding, and don't often understand what the cultural environment is for learning. And this is why there's also such a difference between what the public system offers and the private school offers. And the private school, for example, in Spain, is a much longer day to accommodate all that extra learning that children want. You know, they're at school from 9 to 5:30, where the public school, the children are at school from 9 to 2 o'clock. So they're packing in a lot more of additional learning, and there'll always be that discrimination when it comes to money, unfortunately.
Because they come from all different contexts, don't they? So that's how it changes. The teaching totally changes, transforms from there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think to that question, I think that's possibly one of the reasons why I think like I do about education. So when you get a whole load of children, you know, I was taught in many schools where it's mostly locals and one or two expats, or they're all expats, and a few locals. And in the end, when you get into it, you find that they're all children. They all have very different things, but they understand when you talk about these fundamental things that they're coming with. They understand what they are. They recognize what collaboration is. They might do it differently. They might, culturally, they may do it differently, but therein lies the learning experience. I wouldn't treat them any differently. I would have a fundamental sort of coaching approach to each, and just listen to what they say and let them learn together. Identify who they are, and identify what the commonalities between each other, and be happy to explore the differences.
A footnote to that, Robert, is that most expats want the same education that will slot in globally everywhere around the world, so that their children can spend 2 or 3 years in one school, and then they can pick up that education in another school somewhere else.
What better thing to do than to help them to become the best holistic learner they can be?
Exactly.
You can go anywhere with that.
Exactly. My children bounced around from schools to schools learning, and I consider them well-grounded adults now who are seeing the best and the worst of what we call educational facilities. But yeah, you're quite right.
So have very interesting question that has come up. Where is the place of diversity and multiple intelligence theory in schools today?
Well,
so anybody would like to share? Yes, please go ahead, Robert.
Sorry, I don't want to dominate the thing, but Multiple intelligences, yeah. I think even Howard Gardner became disappointed in how people ended up dealing with multiple intelligences. It was a stepping stone to something else. We've got to, you're right, diversity, all right? So diversity in approach. There's a fundamental thing about all of us which we share. Okay, we are all learners. We're all born learners. I think almost all living things, if you really boil it down, all living things are learners in some way. And we share those things, and then we can explore together. And the fact that you're in a classroom, if you're in a classroom, so this is something I experienced really early on in my career. My first year was in a girls' school in Wimbledon in London. And I had my bottom pinched twice. I never caught who it was. But what I found in that girls' school was that amongst the girls, who were mainly all white, all from London, was that boys gradually appeared. Boy characteristics gradually appeared amongst them. Huge diversity of thinking from all of them. Amazing. You know, when I said boys appeared, it was like people took on the role that you would very often see boys taking on. And the same thing happened when I worked in a boys' school.
Yeah.
You know, they became diverse in themselves. Now, there were some places I went to where they weren't very diverse about certain things, and therefore you questioned it. Now, my role wasn't to question their culture. My role was to get them to question their culture. Not in an aggressive way, but just, I wonder why we do it like that.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Robert. One more question. We have
Can I-
time for. So,
Sorry.
yes,
Can
please go ahead. We have just 30 seconds. Yes, please go
Okay,
ahead.
very quickly, because there was the question about when a school is going through a crisis. Okay?
Yes.
And I wanted to say something very, very quickly. Okay. It really depends on what we mean by crisis, but I think I understand what the person is referring to. I want to give you an example of a real life experience. When I worked at a school in let's say a young school, because I joined just after 5 years that it was established, and a school that was recently allowed to offer a certain curriculum. So I'm not going to mention the kind of curriculum and where the school is. It's just an example. And I discovered that actually some people may refer to that specific situation as a school that was going to fail. Incredibly, it was incredible because the school was recently authorized to offer a specific program, but it was so hard, so difficult to manage the school on a daily basis, mostly because of the conflict. Okay, conflict between the people working there, teachers, but not just teachers. Okay, and it was not really cultural conflict. Okay, because we can. It was, let's say, spread amongst the whole community. What worked? There is one practical tool that a person can use if she or he is in a leadership position. For example, was the open door policy. That means that every coordinator, principal, and even the head of school, we established that we have to physically leave the door open, but also organize moments for people to get in and talk and be heard and listened to. Okay. That was really useful because immediately it reduced the perceived level of conflict over there. The gossiping and the other things that were more ingrained, they didn't disappear, but it was a start. What then happened was being in a listening position, and I avoided to make decisions on matters that I didn't know really well. Okay, obviously, if it was about the safety and security of students, we had to do something. But otherwise, if it was about, I don't know, giving certain people responsibility for an event or something, we were really careful because we didn't know what was behind that.
Yeah.
And let's say, it takes time to have an idea of how things work in a specific environment. And then start making decisions, giving people opportunities to take responsibility for something.
Great, thank you, Diego. We have some questions unanswered, don't worry. We will forward them to the panelists, and you can also communicate through us on the email that will be shown to you in a while, and we can forward them to a panelist and they'll all be answered. So it's all about mindset, practical cases, active learning, inspiration, and engagement. For me, this is what really transforming education is. So be inspired about our thoughts and about what our expertise and panelists have shared with you. And every little step that you individually take towards transforming education, teaching or non-teaching staff, will help the school communities to grow and be better in our education platform. Thank you so much for joining us today. I thank all our panelists who gave time and the expertise to share their knowledge about this most important topic that we need today in transforming education. If you have any more questions, please send them to info@educationalwebinarjam.com, and please mention the name of the panelist you want these questions to be sent to. We will communicate and you will get your answers from there soon. So bye for now, and we look forward to see you in our future events. This session is being recorded and it will be published on our YouTube channel and also on our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marie.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We hope to see you soon again. Bye
Well
for
done,
now.
everybody. Well done.
Thank you.